We are part of the world creation, and we ourselves create nothing. Our knowledge allows us to make use of all the forces already in existence. Our art to interpret emotions already felt. One big war, an epidemic, and we collapse into ignorance and darkness. It's with these words of Arshil Gorky, the Armenian American painter and pioneer of abstract expressionism, that I would like to introduce Atom Egoyan. Atom Egoyan is a critically acclaimed filmmaker, stage director, writer, and producer. Companion of the Order of Canada, Egoyan directed 12 feature films, such as Exotica, The Sweet Hereafter, which landed him an Academy Award nomination for Best Director. He also directed several operas, including Salome, Così fan tutte, The Ring Cycle, all at the Canadian Opera Company. Atom Egoyan has won the Cannes Film Festival 5 times and is widely considered the most famous Armenian filmmaker since Sergei Parajanov. The Egyptian-born, Canadian-raised, Oscar-nominated Master of Cinéma d'Art et d'Essai has also won 4 awards from the prestigious Toronto International Film Festival. His most recent film, Guest of Honor, in 2019, was nominated for the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival. I have the immense pleasure of having Atom Egoyan for an In Focus conversation for smART magazine, with Atom Egoyan looking in on looking out. Hello, Atom Egoyan.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. As good as can be. I feel very grateful that I'm also able to write, so that I'm not going too crazy with the lockdown. But it's been really difficult for the live arts, especially. I also am involved with opera, and we think that film is suffering, but opera is really suffering because of this idea that singers have to actually project their voices at each other. So they're also projecting a lot of uh, germs and viruses, I guess. So it's really, I'm having a conversation today with the new director of the Canadian Opera Company, and we're just trying to see how we move forward with these projects.
And I was just wondering, where are you now? Are you in Toronto?
I'm in Toronto, yeah.
Okay, okay.
This is my studio. This is my space. So it's kind of a crazy space. You can see all around. There's all sorts of things on the walls. All my stuff. It's like a little museum.
Yes, it looks wonderful. There's a lot of research.
Yeah, a lot of research. Yeah.
Okay, so since the onset of the pandemic, have you felt more trapped in time, or on the contrary, more free and more creative?
That's a very good question. You see, because I divide my life into my artistic life into two different activities. One is very private, because when I'm writing or I'm editing, I'm really in solitude in a way. But the other side is incredibly public. I'm either making a film or doing opera or theater, which is a very public activity, or I'm traveling, going to festivals, promoting the films, which again is very public. So I have these two modes. So the private mode actually is fine with this, because in fact that's what when I'm writing, I am in lockdown. I try and separate myself from the world, and I try and be with my own thoughts. So that's been good, actually. I've been writing a lot. But then there's this question of, well, what do we do with all of this in terms of getting it to the real world? And that's been where obviously everyone is dealing with this incredible challenge. And when will people go back to theaters? Will they feel comfortable to go back to the theaters? Also, our whole viewing habit has changed dramatically, because we've become very used to streaming devices. We've become very used to seeing things privately. And that's a fundamentally different experience than when we're in a theater and we don't control time. You're asking about time. Well, when we go to a theater, we are giving up time. We are saying that for this 2 hours, I will not have control over time. I will be locked in this seat, in this space with all these strangers. And that's the magic of theater in a way. And I would say it used to be the magic of cinema, but it's changing now, because we're used to seeing cinema at home and actually disrupting time, putting it on pause,
Mhm.
going to have a coffee, maybe having a telephone conversation and then going back.
Mhm.
So that's disrupted our sense of cinema as being a moment where we suspend time.
Mhm.
And all the great films that I love, and actually my whole approach to filmmaking is about this idea of surrendering yourself to the screen image. And I
Mhm.
don't think we do that anymore. In a way, it's become a question of survival because uh, it's possible to make that commitment. It's possible to say, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to turn off the phone. I'm going to turn off the lights. I'm just going to watch the screen.
Mhm.
But very few people do that. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it has become a rare habit.
Yeah.
So, like, we can say it's that the confinement in general, like, is it necessary for your work to create? And do you think that this period can be propitious for creation? And how has your relation to creation changed, if it has changed?
Well, again, a very good question. I think that it means that I'm spending a lot of time reading, writing, researching, listening, uh, and a lot of time catching up on a lot of work that I've missed, and also considering maybe too much what my relationship to the current culture is. So before, the act of creation was quite spontaneous because I knew I could write something, I could go out and find the financing or find the producing partner, and it could be made.
Mhm.
But that's not so easy right now for a number of reasons. And so, even though one is really spending a lot of time in contemplation, that connection to production has become a bit fragile.
Mhm.
So, and you're thinking a lot about this massive shift in our society. We are dealing with an extraordinary amount of an extraordinary amount of grief. I mean, I think that we have lost so much. And of course, I'm also speaking particularly as an Armenian. It's been a very, very tough few months with the war in Artsakh and kind of this idea of uh, dealing with this loss and what that means. So during that war, for instance, I was writing for the first time a book, a novella,
Mhm.
and it was my way of coping with this feeling every day of what was um, clearly a catastrophe
Mhm.
for the Armenian people. Um, but I don't have any urge now to present this book. Like I wrote it, but I don't have the urge to make it public because how can I put this? It's almost as though I don't feel that there is a need for it.
Is it more like kind of a diary? Is
Well,
it?
interesting. It is a diary, but it's of a fictional character. It's the diary of a young woman who uh, was coming from a village in Artsakh and has lost her family and is now trying to deal with it. But it's strange. I must confess,
Mhm.
this is my own delusion. As I was writing it, I really did feel that Armenia was going to win. That Armenia, because I think a lot of us felt this idea that it was going because of propaganda, because of our own wish fantasy. I felt that the outcome would be different. And
Mhm.
now that the outcome is clearly what it is, it's very painful for me to go back to this material.
Mhm.
So I'm happy I wrote it, but I don't feel like sharing it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
And this is the case with a lot of things I've been writing over the pandemic. I've written like 3 scripts. I've written, but I'm being really selective as to what it is I need to focus on in terms of where the world might be. Because as artists, we have these antennae and we're trying to sense, what is the undercurrent of
Mhm.
what's happening around us.
Mhm.
And it's difficult to understand that right now because it's such a unprecedented evolution moment in our evolution collectively, where we're become very used to this digital connection like we're doing right now.
Mhm.
Now I've dealt with that in a lot of my early films that I made in the 80s, these films like In Speaking Parts, you have these incredible moments where people are doing exactly what we're doing,
Mhm.
but it was a very different technology at the time. It was a satellite. It was very expensive. You had to be very specific of how much time you were going to spend on it. But
Mhm.
now it's easy. It's effortless.
Mhm.
So I've thought about these issues, but they've changed radically in terms of what they mean in terms of where we are now. I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
I haven't seen my mother on the west coast of Canada for actually almost 5 6 months, which is very unusual. Either my sister or I we go out there physically to see her. She's older, but now we're connected through FaceTime,
Mhm.
and it's shocking to me uh, th- how available we are to each other. So my whole sense of the relationship to the technology is very different, because even if I was to go out there now, like last time I was there, I couldn't be in the same room with her because of the COVID situation. I was seeing her through a window.
Okay.
The window was open. I was outside.
Mhm.
But with this technology of FaceTime, I'm closer to her than when I was there physically.
Mhm.
So it raises the question of, well, where is it more intimate? Has the technology allowed for an intimacy which, because of the current space we're in, is not permissible? And what is the long-term effect of that in terms of how we relate to each other?
Absolutely.
What does touch mean? Where is touch right now in this process? So I can't touch my mother,
Mhm.
but I can be very close to her.
Yeah.
And so these are all, and this question of touch came up in this film I made in 1988 called Speaking Parts. It has a very famous scene, I guess, where two lovers are separated from each other, but they're sexually connecting through touching each other. But it's different,
Mhm.
even though it looks the same because it's a video screen and they look like they're on Zoom, or but it's a different feeling, because at that time the video connection could be interrupted at any point. It could just cut off. So there was this feeling of it being very special,
Mhm.
and in fact it enhanced and maybe almost exaggerated certain feelings, distorted certain feelings because of the nature of the technology. But that's not the case now. This has become very, very fluid, very almost second nature.
Mhm. So, like going in that sense, so I'm considering the exploration of mediation and representation in your work.
Mhm.
So, do you think these new types of bonds being created with our like close ones, like beloved ones, uh, those types of bonds may take shape as a mesh of resilience for the future, or is this simply an acceleration of the existing trends? Is this a sense we're going?
Great question. Both. I think that it is a sense of resilience against the future, because if the future is one in which we cannot uh, easily be with each other, then these technologies become incredibly valuable. But even after this pandemic is over, I think a lot of us will now reconsider what it means to get on an airplane and very easily, travel, because we understand that we don't need to be everywhere. Like, for instance, in my life as a filmmaker, I was going physically to all these festivals.
Hmm.
Do I need to do that? I mean, I've now shown my film around the world through like introducing it on screen through a Zoom connection, or having interviews and doing all my press through these types of Zoom connections. So why do I need to get on a plane? Why do I need to contribute to the global climate crisis by taking an airplane? And like, so these are uh, the technology. I mean, I'm very thankful this pandemic happened at this moment where the technology has allowed these contacts to still be possible. Think of how much more catastrophic and traumatic it would be if we didn't have Zoom, if we didn't have FaceTime, if we didn't have these ways of connecting with each other. But there is a long-term effect, and I'm not sure if it makes sense for someone of my generation to um, to examine this as much as somebody who's the age of, let's say, my niece who's finishing high school. And so these 2 years, which are very important social years, are not available to her. in that way. And so that she will be formed by that profoundly.
Mhm.
That will change her view of the world. And I think that uh, we can't anticipate what that means exactly, except to say that we know it's a dramatic difference. There's a before and after that
Mhm.
we're looking at now.
Yeah. And in your answer, you're actually questioning like a luxury of 20th and 21st century, which is traveling. So
Yeah,
you are questioning the fact of traveling with the new bonds
yeah,
we have created.
of course, because it was so effortless before. It was just like, and we came to expect it. But this changes it so much about the film industry because so much of it is based on this notion of glamour and red carpet and presence and you know uh, and I'm seeing it like this year with the Academy Awards. Like so many people are making themselves available through Zoom conversations,
Hmm.
and that there's no longer the sense of a film premiere. It's shifted, and I'm not sure how quickly it's going to go back
Hmm.
because we have to question the necessity, both at an industrial level, but also psychologically. What do we need to believe that something is special?
Hmm.
It used to be that what made something special was that someone would arrive physically.
Hmm.
So is there now a way that we are, and this is, I think there's nothing that can come close to what happens in a cinema or in a theater where there's a live presentation and there's an interaction between the person on stage and this group of strangers in a black room who are projecting onto that person. That
Hmm.
is almost a sacred relationship that we've had since the beginning of live theater. You know that in these amazing Greek amphitheaters, there was always this felt of a community that had gathered,
Hmm.
who were projecting themselves onto a human being on stage who was projecting back, and that this created this almost mythological relationship between a collective projection
Hmm.
and the ability of someone to be um, an oracle, an oracle of belief and feeling and the focus, the pinpoint of a collective consciousness.
Hmm.
It was I think it was Andre Malraux who said that the definition of a star is someone who embodies a collective consciousness. So the question is, how do we now appraise what a collective consciousness means in the world of technology when that is actually accelerated
Hmm.
and you know accelerated and digested and then almost passed, in a much more concentrated, or you can almost say detached way.
Hmm. Do you
These
think,
are big questions. These are really big questions.
yeah, it is, but do you think it's digested already?
No, no, no. I think well, this is where it becomes generational. For someone who's young, it's been digested for sure,
Hmm.
because that's how the young mind is. The brain is having to make these digestions very quickly,
Hmm.
because it's going to form their sense of the world. So that's why I'm saying that there's a break between the brain that's digesting it very quickly
Hmm.
and the older brain who is trying to understand it in the context of a world that we have come to absorb. So that's why I'm saying it's going to be, I will digest it very slowly. You're
Hmm.
younger than me. You will digest it quicker than I am. And someone who is in their teens are going to digest it very quickly because they need to. They need to survive. They need to now come into this world and function in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from your perspective, like as an artist, as a human being, from your context, like I mean, generational and cultural. So, what is your vision of the world we currently live in? Is this a continuity or a disruption, reality or illusion?
Well, I mean, compounded by the fact that we're living in this time of fake news and this incredible phenomenon where our sense of reality is basically based on our feeling. Or if we want to feel that something is true, then it becomes true because it's what we feel. And it's in denial of any sort of empirical evidence. It just becomes its own reality. And we've actually come to, like, shockingly, we've come to absorb that. And actually, it's a fundamental denial of any scientific sort of sense of what an imperial reality, like, uh, it's philosophically so messed up that we can even be talking about this notion of fake news as being a component of how we understand the world. But there's been so many examples of it, and so many leaders who are actually promoting it, that and people who are believing it. I mean, obviously, we see this in the States. Like, it's like that's what we've experienced over the past 5 years. And it's but we see it also with the anti-vaccine crowd here, like, these parades of people who are just, denying what is obvious, right? And they create a reality for themselves, and there's so many people who are creating separate realities for themselves that before, these were fringe ideas, like that the world is flat, for instance. I remember when I was a student, I did an essay on these people who still believe that the world is flat. And it seemed like such a crazy idea, but in fact, it's now socially acceptable that if you believe that, that's real.
So,
Oh, that's your reality. Okay, that's your reality. I have my own reality. You have your own reality. And again, as Armenians, we understand this. I mean, we kind of live with this world of denial all the time. Uh, but now it's become really interesting as an Armenian, because we're also having to deal with our own denial of how vulnerable we are, how alone we are, how there's no one really to protect us. We have these ideas, like, there are these munificent partners that will always protect the Armenian kind of identity, but we realize, no, actually, it's just us. And that's sobering. But maybe we've been living also with this kind of false reality as well. I mean, so I can look at it from a global perspective. I can look at it, from an Armenian perspective. I can also look at it from a Canadian perspective. Like, it's also interesting to see, Canada has a sense of where it is in terms of human rights issues, and its proclamations, and we had a sense of our own history. And over the past 10 years, we've had to completely re-examine what that identity means as well. I'm thinking about our relationship to indigenous issues, the fact that what it means to have this history that we've also suppressed as Canadians. So there's so much to absorb. Like, it's so as an artist, it's exciting. I mean, but also, it's a monumental task to try and and determine what are the narratives that need to be put forward at this time.
so do you think we are living an era of subjectivity?
Yeah, we're totally living in a time of like, any reality is what you make of it,
Yeah.
and that's sanctioned. Like, that's the difference. Like, it's not that you say, okay, that's just crazy. You don't say, well, that's crazy anymore, because you understand that that's a legitimate way of understanding truth. Like, well, if I believe it, then anything else is fake news.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you have the president of the the most powerful person in the world, who for 4 years has been saying that that's fake news,
Mm-hmm.
then I think a lot of people will understand that that's okay to have that view, that your sense of reality is actually validated, as 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 insane as some of the ideas are.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And do you think it is possible to capture this world in words or images to create a narrative that fits it?
oh, I think it's very possible to create narratives that reflect that. I mean, we see that in a lot of really great films and literature. Literature has always been able to do it. The question is, like, what to what end? Like, what? Uh, you know, I'm of a generation that would think that a great artist has the ability to actually alter our sense of what is real. There's a profound way in which the writings of a different generation, but the writings of Voltaire, or the writings of Goethe, or the writings of like Dostoevsky, that if you were to absorb these ideas, it would have a transformational effect on the society you're living in.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have, in parallel with great artists, uh, collective communities who are generating their own myth
Mm-hmm.
and making that powerful, then they're putting all their creative energy into doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is its own uh, uh, audience. And so, and maybe it's just understanding really that the type of art we're talking about. See, this is where it's different. In the Greek time, like everyone was in this amphitheater, and they were all, you know, uh, they were all absorbing this collectively. What the great, like the Aeschylus or Sophocles and Euripides, and we've had this connection, I think, for a long time. That there was this idea of popular culture as having this galvanizing effect on the way um, a community could understand their world. But it's
Mm-hmm.
become incredibly splintered now,
Yeah.
very splintered. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not sure what artist determines what that collective reality that's being examined might be. So we're much more determined by algorithms now. So when you, let's say you're watching certain things on your computer, certain other things will come up. You should watch this.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the splintering already. That there's a computer program that's assessing what your interests are and actually determining how you should be viewing and exploring your own world,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to an algorithm which says, okay, you like this, watch something completely different and be changed by that.
Mm-hmm.
So that rather than consolidating your sensibility,
Mm-hmm.
your world is opened by something completely outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
Algorithms don't work that way.
No.
So what will then be the effect of that in a generation? I don't know.
Mm. And how about, so this experience is still like collective, universal for humans, and how do you think this experience will affect the storytelling in cinema?
Well, there's classic cinema.
Mm-hmm.
There's the type of cinema I'm still trying to make, which is like 1.5 hours to 2 hours of a narrative line where people watch it in a cinema
Mm-hmm.
or watch it. But in reality, that's become very marginal as an activity. Very few people actually still watch films this way. So we're now very used to the extended dramatic form,
Mm-hmm.
which is a mini series or limited series, which we don't even watch. We can determine whether or not we're going to binge watch it. We're going to watch it all as one long 8-hour movie,
Mm-hmm.
or we're going to break it up, or like. So there's that, but at the same time there's this incredible new world of virtual reality
Mm-hmm.
where we put on masks and we are determining a totally different relationship to narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not we're not following a story. We're actually we're very involved in creating that story. So that will also affect traditional storytelling methods, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know much about video games, but I think you could say that in video game culture that's been happening for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And let's remember that the video game culture has a much larger economy now than film. Like if a lot of people who are not playing video games are not aware of uh, how how huge an influence they have on a certain demographic.
hmm And like, so about the storytelling, to come back to the storytelling in cinema, maybe like if we're referring to the art house, like le cinéma d'art et d'essai,
Mhm.
like how do you think that cinema, which is the one which is actually questioning the periods we're living, for example, what Godard did, and what like I don't know, after Godard like has been done, like it's kind of marking the context, right? Like the context we're living. So like how
I,
about cinema
I
d'art?
just think it's becoming a more marginal form. I mean, I think that like at a certain point, it had a huge effect on social awareness. I mean, if you look at the classic art cinema of Godard and Buñuel and Bergman and Bresson and Antonioni and Fellini and like so many filmmakers that have had a huge effect on me. That had a golden period, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but it's shifted. I mean, there are great film artists working now, but you they don't have the same some I just think that form, uh the mythology was of a
Mm-hmm,
certain time, and that's okay. I mean, art goes through different evolutions, right? I
hmm
mean, at one point, there was this incredible movement towards opera was considered to be a very, very popular public form. Now it's kind of considered to be more rarefied. It's more elite. It's not as public. But I remember, like, when I met Arsene, my wife, she said that her father, who's not a cinephile, he saw Pasolini's Theorem in a popular cinema in Beirut. I mean, that's that world has changed. Like where you can have difficult films that were being presented to a public that went to see them because they wanted to be part of uh, they wanted to be part of what everyone else was watching,
hmm
like what was being discussed. Well, again, it goes back to this notion of how we become splintered. Like it's not there's nothing so monolithic.
hmm
I mean, of course, there is in popular music. I mean, we all listen now to The Weeknd, who I think is a great artist, and like I think that we watched his show at the Super Bowl halftime, and that is monumental. So I'm not saying that there's no there are still these moments of a collective live, even though that was virtual, but it felt live, and so everyone was watching that around the world, and that's so it still exists, but in terms of cinema, I mean,
hmm
it's become a very marginal practice. Let's admit it. Like, I mean, I'm proud that right now my films are available on a station called the Criterion Channel, right? But not that many people know about the Criterion Channel. Like, it's like it's like for the people who love cinema, it's a gift, but it's a pretty, it's a cult, right?
yeah, yeah. So, and like just coming from that like talking of that experience in cinema and like the cinema places being closed and theater places being closed, the opera places being
Mm.
closed. Uh, do you think we will further become strangers to each other, or does this like shared experience give us like a common vulnerability or offer the grounds for new intimacies?
Well, human beings are social animals. I mean, like, so we will find ways to maintain our social connection to each other. Like, we're programmed to be social. So, uh, I guess what I'm saying is just the way in which we do that will evolve.
Mm-hmm,
You it won't be. I think that, like, let's say in the world of opera, when I go to an evening of opera in Toronto, I mean, there's a social function. People love to be in the atrium. People like to, dress nicely and like to show off and like to be in a cultural place. But um, well, we'll see. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to come back the same way. I can't tell you. I know that it was a big part of our lives, before the pandemic. You could say that it was already changing, but the pandemic certainly has has exaggerated
mm-hmm.
the way in which things will shift.
Yeah. So do you think like we're living through a time that may bring profound changes in human relationships?
Oh yeah, we are. Of course we are. Yeah. I mean, this is This is I mean, little things, okay? For instance, I mean, right now I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at the camera because I know that if I look at the lens, you will have direct eye contact. If I
Mhm,
look at you, people will not see my eyes. So
mhm.
for this whole conversation, I've been looking at this lens and I've been seeing the shape of your face, but I haven't been making eye to eye contact. So I'll tell you a bizarre situation. Does that mean that if we do this enough,
Yeah.
when we meet each other face to face for a moment, we're going to be looking above each other at our foreheads? I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm joking, but it's like you can't say that this has conditioned something in me that I've been looking at this small dot on my computer,
Mhm,
making eye contact. Like that's absurd. But I've now become like very used to it, and I've noticed that many people at the beginning of the pandemic, older people were not looking at the lens; they were looking down,
mhm.
like this, but over this time, they've understood
Yeah.
that this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how, again, like we are very adaptable. We kind of like figure out how to navigate.
Yeah, I was going to say you have become like a professional of the Zoom meetings.
Yeah. So now I'm going to look at you. For the rest of it, I'm not going to not. So you don't have direct eye contact. I'm just going to look at you, and you have very. There's a very nice light in your room right now. It's very bright, and there's shadows on the ceiling. And now I'm looking at you after over half an hour we've been talking, and finally I'm seeing you. So now,
So like beside of this like profound changes in human relationships, so is our relationship to the image is going to change, or is it changing?
well, it's changing right now, and now that I'm looking at you, my relationship with this image has changed. So maybe we should end with that. We'll end with this beautiful moment where I'm looking at you and I'm not looking at anyone else but you, and now I'm looking at you. You see
Mhm.
like the
Yeah,
difference? Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and like so, the last question on this point, but will this common experience force changes on our genres and methods of representations, like how we look on the camera of a Zoom? Will it have like much bigger repercussions?
You have to think it will. I mean, like like there's this. I made a film called Citadel. Like it was a documentary about going back to Beirut with my wife, and at one point I quoted from the Calvino story called The Photographer, and that basically he says that if you are aware that every moment of your life is actually being observed, or that it can be photographed, you either you're constantly acting in the most photographable way imaginable, or you're actually imagining that everything is entirely based on observation, and that leads to paranoia, which leads to a certain madness, right? So I think Calvino wrote this like a long time ago, but he was kind of anticipating this condition. And
Hmm.
I was listening today about this situation with China, that a year after China, like like where it was the outbreak happened in China, it's that they've actually eradicated COVID.
Hmm.
But why have they eradicated it? Well, it's because that population is willing to actually submit itself to surveillance. Like it's prepared to actually let the government have complete surveillance over its life.
Hmm.
And in a way, they've survived this pandemic in a much more dramatic way than the West, which is very cautious of this, which wants privacy, which wants us to have these private spaces, doesn't want the government to know where we are all the time.
Hmm.
So that's also interesting too. That maybe we'll look at China and go, oh, maybe it's okay to surrender that those small aspects of our own privacy that we still consider to be important. Maybe we just give that up because we want to just let the government look after us, you
Hmm.
know, um, become passive. And listen, this is what we've been taught to react against. I mean, in the West, that we will not allow ourselves to become the puppets of a regime.
Hmm.
But COVID maybe changes that as well a little bit.
About what you were saying, like about your movie Citadel and that reference to the code
Oh,
you're thinking.
mm, mm.
There is another movie I think which you've been quoted already, and I was just wondering, like, if it can be the symbol of those times, which is the movie of Samuel Beckett called Film, uh,
Hmm.
with a kitten
Yeah.
like
Well,
playing.
yeah. Well, I mean, the philosophical idea in film is that it's from the Berkeley's philosophical proposition that ecce est percepe, to be is to be perceived.
Hmm.
That if you cut out uh, all all possibilities of external perception, self-perception remains,
Hmm.
and the torture of a completely a world in which one is left only with self-perception does lead to an intense sense of loneliness, right? I mean,
Hmm.
so yeah, yeah. I mean, look, it's it's it, it's an exciting time to be an artist because these are all great questions. These are all profound philosophical questions, and there's certainly been a lot of time to reflect on it.
Hmm.
But there's a difference between reflection and actual the practical idea of how things just continue to move forward, how we reorient ourselves.
Hmm.
And um, let's say in China, I was just watching this essay in the New York Times, a video essay. There's been a huge phenomenon of people who are live streaming. I don't know if you've been reading that people, there's a whole culture around live streaming,
Hmm.
and we don't understand that yet here. It's not really part of it. So there you're looking, okay, that's an interesting experiment, so that you
Hmm.
have this huge population which is used to observation from a government source, and they've become now addicted to live streaming each other and watching those private channels.
Hmm.
um, that's radically different from where we are in terms of how we understand this transmission of image and what sharing means.
Hmm.
So yeah, there is a before and after.
There is. And so do we need less reality and more poetry at this moment? More dreams or less fantasy?
Well, ideally, we need this perfect combination of the two. I mean, that's what we've always needed. I mean, you can't exist totally in a world of poetry, and I would suggest you can't exist totally. At least I can't exist totally in a world of reality. Um, I think that the harnessing of the two will always need to be a part of our condition. It's just that the way in which that happens, and that's what we've been talking about, has altered.
Hmm.
And the balances have been recalibrated in ways that we um, haven't anticipated, maybe, to be happening so fast. I mean, I think we anticipated this, but we didn't know we would have to be dealing with it so quickly.
Yeah. And just a last question, maybe, Adam. When you're working on an opera project and on a film project, is your line of work of creation, your inspirations are the same for the both or not?
No, 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 no. I think when I'm working with opera, I'm really trying to respond to the music
Mhm.
and to the feeling of the music, and which is very exciting. I mean, to do that. But when I'm working on my own ideas, uh, the music is actually the last thing that I put onto it, right? Like on the film, it's the last stage of the film, but in opera, it's the first stage of the film. So it's um, really I'm reacting to opera as an observer, as someone who's feeling this and trying to see what images it creates. But when I'm writing something, I'm originating that feeling. So it's yeah, they're quite different processes, but they're both dealing with a world I love, which is drama and music. I mean, they're I except I would say that it's funny when you mention Beckett, because the most extreme film I've made maybe is the film version of Krapp's Last Tape with John Hurt, where there's no music at all, and it's really the most minimalist. It's one man in a room, a tape recorder, and a film camera. So, but there's a music, I think, even in the language in that. There's a way that Beckett writes, which is just, it has its unbelievably poetic language. Like really beautiful lines I can still quote. Because they're so poetic. So it has its own music, I suppose, through words.
Mhm. Well, do you have a last word?
Yes, I don't. I will look down at you and say, I'll look up at you. and say it into your electronic eye. Goodbye.
Thank you so very much, Atom Egoyan, for taking the time, and thanks for being my guest.
Okay, bye.
Voilà.